Edward Burtynsky, the son of Ukrainian immigrants, he grew up in a manufacturing town in St. Catharines, Ontario, where the GM plant was a part of the backdrop of his early life. Ed found his calling young. His auto worker dad picked up some used equipment and set him up with a basement darkroom when he was just 11 years old. Now, within a year, young Edward was selling his pictures for 75 cents a pop to neighbors in the hood, using the proceeds, by the way, to buy more film. Today, Edward Burtynsky's work is instantly recognizable, and the prints are of epic proportions. So are the projects he tackles, by the way. Dams, quarries, mines, freeways, and factories. No one captures the awesome/awful ambition of human industry quite like Burtynsky.
I think artists are well suited to raise questions because we don't control power, but in a way we can reflect back.
Edward's work was also the subject of the award-winning 2007 documentary called Manufactured Landscapes.
If I said this is a terrible thing that we're doing to the planet, then people will either agree or disagree. By not saying what you should see, that may allow them to see their world a little differently.
He's also being bestowed with an Eco Hero Award from this year's Planets in Focus Environmental Film Festival. Everybody, Edward Burtynsky.
Great to be here, Joe. Pleasure to have you on.
When you see those photos, I mean, I'm sure the way you look at these sites in front of you can come from a lot of different places, but I want you just to go right back to the beginning. Tell me about your father and I guess his influence on what it is you do now.
Well, I grew up in St. Catharines, which was a GM town. It was pretty much a one-company town. At that time, there was 11,000 workers that were working at GM in 100,000 towns, so it was like 1 out of 10. And they used to open up the factory to open houses. And when I was 7, I was able to see the making of block engines, like the metal pouring down chutes into the blocks. I was able to see big forge plants, these guys in silver, and I was really impressed by what was on the other side of that wall. And I used to go by that wall when I was a kid, and my father worked there, but I never knew what it was. And then all of a sudden this crazy world opened up. And I don't think it ever left me. It was always like this impression that we don't know that world. We drive in a car, but we don't know the place that made that car. We don't know the place of the stuff that comes from for our home. So we're totally disconnected. And if you think like 200 years ago, that's not the case. Your home was at all the materials that were within, a cart drive away.
Sure,
yeah. And so I think that started to form the idea that there was a subject here that somehow had a lot of meaning to who we are in today's society.
It's one of the things that I think when people take a look at, especially when you're taking photographs that play well within the environmental crowd, that see the impact humans have had on the globe itself, what seems to be often missing from that conversation is there are people who are working here. Like those plants create jobs, right? But there is a sort of empathy that is missing from, I think, the discussion. Did you find that when you presented your photos, did the people on either side get the same thing out of them?
Well, it's almost like I think the images are like a Rorschach test. They don't tell you how to think. So depending on where you're coming from, you can interpret them in different ways. So I think that open narrative, I think, is an important aspect to the work because unlike a film, which has words and narrative, a still image just sits there quietly, and you in your own consciousness have to decide what it is that's going on. Now, there might be text underneath it saying, this is that, and you should think about this image this way, but I purposely avoid that. I want the fact that I'm not indicting industry, and I understand that this is where real jobs come. In fact, when you look at our stock exchange in Canada, 50% is energy and mining. So half of every dollar on that stock exchange is involved in that activity. Many jobs, I mean, the governments, our taxes that come in are supporting our economy. It's holding it up. And so there's this kind of uncomfortable moment we're in where we're realizing that there are things that we're doing that are debilitating and hard on the planet, but yet how can we stop ourselves?
You think for you, and I mean, I guess I don't know if great art can ever be a fluke or by accident, but this isn't how it was supposed to be for you. One wrong turn, and the inspiration for your art is different. Weren't you just driving around, being a photographer, taking pictures of nature?
Yeah, I was, and I spent several years doing that. And I kept trying to say, well, how do I go somewhere else that Ansel Adams didn't go? How do I, introduce color? How do I begin to work with a large format camera in that landscape? Being a Canadian, I think there was so much of it that I thought, well, I love
your car, drive 2 hours north, man. You have an entire career.
Yeah,
you've got my portfolio.
Yeah, and it's a very complex space. I mean, when you go into nature, there's no other space like walking through a forest as for complexity. But you go into a city, and you got manufactured walls and streets, and everything's kind of finished as finished surface.
Dare you say manufactured landscapes?
Yeah, cities are manufactured landscapes, yes. Of course. So it was this idea that I could maybe add something to that conversation. And after years of doing it, I recognized that there's nothing new I can say about that. We know that place. It's kind of ended up in like a cliche or genre that we understand that place that we call nature. So it's gone to the camera clubs, it's gone to the calendar, it's gone to the postcard. And how to kind of add something to that dialogue is very hard. But when I got lost in Pennsylvania, all of a sudden I found myself in this coal mining town called Frackville.
So you were driving looking for like trees and?
Yeah, I was doing pure landscapes, and all of a sudden I end up in this landscape, and it's all been totally altered. And so there's these mounds of coal slag, and these poplars were just popping through at that point. And I was looking at that landscape, and I had this eureka moment, saying, well, this is a landscape, but it's not one anybody's really talked about. It's the one we change. It's the one that we go and intervene. And thinking, well, as a Canadian, natural resources is our largest industry. And so to me, that became, it started to solidify as an idea that I can go out there and begin to talk about how we change that landscape as the new landscape.
And it was a very, either intentional or otherwise, your photographs are political because people, for whatever reason, feel they need to make a decision. You may not have text under that tells them how to feel, but people will feel things. They will look at that and say that is beautiful. They will look at that and they will say that is awful. Right. Of what it's doing to our place. Is that art's role in this world to make people sort of take a stand?
I think if you fix the meaning, you really turn something that it can be multidimensional into like a single dimension. It says you can only see this way. And I think that somebody who's a miner may have a whole different relationship to that image versus someone who's an art historian versus somebody who's just a art-loving public. Or an environmentalist will see it somewhat differently. So we all kind of bring our baggage to it and we read from it. And I think, to me, that's more exciting. That I think good art doesn't fix the meaning. It opens up kind of meaning. And
but you're a human being and you're a smart guy. So do you bring your own baggage to it? When you take that photo, despite the fact that you want people to take their own meaning from it, does it have a meaning for you?
Yeah, I see us as out of balance. I see that, our population of 6.5 billion on the planet and the technology and the Industrial Revolution and at the rate it's going is putting us at a very, very difficult crossroads.
Okay, let's show some pictures of the new stuff. Landscape of oil?
Yeah.
Okay, without fixing a meaning to it. Yep. Let's take a look at a picture. We got some stills here. Look at this one here. Where's that?
This is in northern Alberta around Fort McMurray. It's the oil sands. This is a tailings pond. So when you heard the story of the 500 ducks that landed, it was in one of these ponds.
What does that mean to you?
To me, this is the largest mining operation on the planet. It's the largest surface mining operation on the planet, and it's just beginning. So it means, to me, one of the largest questions as Canadians that we have today, how we go about dealing with that resource.
Let's see the next picture here. Take a look at another still here for, well, okay, we'll get that one. Yeah. Pull up in just a second. Now, you just got an Eco-Warrior award? Is that like a superhero in a comic book?
I guess so.
To be an Eco-Warrior?
I don't know how to do for it now. I have to go save something.
Do you get a cape with that? Is that what happens? There's no cape? This one
I'm being fitted this afternoon.
That's amazing. Pick blue. Always blue.
Okay.
This picture here.
Yeah, so this, the oil sands has an awful lot. It's like sour crude. So it has an awful lot of sulfur in it. So this is when they're upgrading it, so that plant in the back, it's called an upgrader, they take out the sulfur because they're not allowed to put it into the air. Otherwise, that would be sulfur dioxide, acid rain. Right. So this is all being stockpiled and for future use. It does have industrial uses, but right now there's a surplus of it because so much comes out of oil that they don't have enough industrial uses for it.
The streaks are red down there in the bottom. Look like just rivers of blood coming down, don't they?
They do. They do.
I'm sure that would be political in and of itself then, wouldn't it? That particular image. So congratulations on this. One of the questions I want to ask you is just about the cameras. Switching to digital.
Yeah.
I know a lot of photographers, that is a conversation with them. Was switching to digital an issue for you?
Well, I'm still a foot in both worlds. So I shoot large format on the ground when I have a tripod. And a lot of my work, like this last work that you saw, is shot from a helicopter. And I'm using digital with a gyro on it, a 40 megapixel. They're now coming out with a 60 megapixel, and they soon to be 120 megapixel. So that's actually starting to exceed film.
So from that helicopter shot in Alberta, you could take a picture of us right here. With those particular
and be able to say, look, that's George.
That's George, exactly. Don't tell anybody what it means. It's good to see you, man.
Great to see you.
Edward Burtynsky, everybody. Eco Hero Award tonight. He's getting that at the Planet in Focus Film Festival. He's also up for the prestigious $100,000 Free Ticket Award, which is taking place in France. Edward Burtynsky. When we come back, Mike Holmes. Edward Burtynsky, the son of Ukrainian immigrants, he grew up in a manufacturing...
Reflect back.
Edward's work was also the subject of the award-winning 2007 documentary called Manufactured Landscapes.
If I said this is a terrible thing that we're doing to the planet, then people will either agree or disagree. By not saying what you should see, that means...
Selling his pictures for 75 cents a pop to neighbors in the hood, using the proceeds, by the way, to buy more film. Today, Edward Burtynsky's work is instantly recognizable, and the prints are of epic proportions. So are the projects he tackles, by the way. Dams, quarries, mines, freeways, and factories. No one captures the awesome/awful ambition of human industry quite like Burtynsky.
I think artists are well suited to raise questions because we don't control power, but in a way we can...
Manufacturing town in St. Catharines, Ontario, where the GM plant was a part of the backdrop of his early life. Ed found his calling young. His auto worker dad picked up some used equipment and set him up with a basement darkroom when he was just 11 years old. Now, within a year, young Edward was